Hello, friends, and welcome back to another edition of Conservation Stories. This is a podcast brought to you by the Sandhills Area Research Association, or SARA, as we say, because it's a lot easier to say than that whole big old long phrase. And I am not actually going to be the host today. We're kind of going to flip the script on you because you've probably listened to several of our podcasts, and maybe you're wondering, who is the host? Tillery Timmons-Sims. Like, who is this unknown person? And why am I listening to her? And how come she knows about all of these random facts? So, on the advice of the producer, I have asked my friend Nick Bergfeld, who has been the host of the number one syndicated radio show, non-syndicated radio show in Lubbock, around town, which was a great podcast. Are they out there somewhere where people can hear them?
You can still find them on Texas Tech Public Media website as well as on Spotify, but unfortunately we're no longer broadcasting on air.
So sad, because they were really good. And a lot, kind of the format I think that we have of, local folks and what's happening, maybe more on the rural side than in the urban side. But real similar. So, Nick and I met, 2019, I think. Yeah. And, I'm not actually sure how we met, but, I think it had something to do with hemp, which will be part of this conversation, I am sure. So, I would like to just pitch it to you.
Sure.
And let you try to interview me.
Yeah, it sounds great. Well, hey, y'all. I'm Nick Bergfeld. Very excited to be here today and to talk with my dear friend Tillery about her life and all of the things that she works on for the betterment of our community out here. I've gotten to know Tillery over about 7-8 years and seen her energy and drive and motivation really move the needle on a lot of different topics here in West Texas. And so the opportunity to help shed a little bit of light on who this amazing person is for me is just a lot of fun. So I'm going to get a kick out of this.
It's going to be fun. I'm a little nervous, I must admit.
Too funny. So Tillery, I just want to start by saying, how would you describe your connection to West Texas?
Well, fourth generation farm family, both sides. My dad's family settled in the Ropesville area, and my mom's family in the Needmore area, and then Union. And Union originally over on the way to like Lamesa Welch, that Union, because we have a lot of Unions and a lot of Needmores in Texas. So, and then Needmore, and then their parents eventually bought land in Terry County across the turn row from each other. And that's how they met. My dad was at Ropesville High School, and my mom was in Brownfield. And then I married local boy. He was an odd boy. He's 8 years older than me. So I do recommend actually marrying a grown man. It's very helpful. So Doug and our families have been friends for many years. He's, was farming, and I expected my life to be just like my mom's and my grandmother's and my great-grandmother's. And yet here I am living in town.
Lubbock over time, starting as a farm community, has grown a lot over the years. Mm-hmm. And as a part of that, we have a lot of folks in the community now that don't necessarily have a strong connection to what farm life is like.
That's true.
What were some of your experiences like growing up in farm life?
So I think when I was growing up, it was, I look at our culture, and I know this is just my opinion, but I divide our culture between pre-GMO and post-GMO.
Oh. Mm.
And I don't have any issues with the science of GMOs. I think it's like every type of innovation, it comes with positives and negatives. And I think it changed a lot of our culture in the way that I grew up. The innovation has changed the need for, kids to be on the farm as much, and so it was really my generation where I started seeing like some of my friends, they might be in farm families, but they're not living on the farm, and then my kids' generation was definitely a mass exodus from the small communities into Lubbock to really get into private schools and, live more of a city life, And so it's changed a lot. There are, and I just have so much respect for those folks that are still out there, It's hard here to live in the country. In fact, we'll be releasing a podcast that my husband and I did, Doug, talking about our history in agriculture, and we went through bankruptcy, and particularly we spent a lot of time talking about that in that episode. And I told him after we decided to move to Lubbock after about 2 weeks, I was like, there's a reason people move to town, because it is a lot more convenient than living 75 miles in any direction from a Walmart, And so the struggle of, if you're from that community, it's great, and you have deep roots and connections. But if you move into it, it's very difficult to, break into. I've got 2 or 3 really deep relationships from those times, because we actually moved from where we grew up, which is in the Brownfield area north, and so it's a hard life. And, it's a lot of stress, and a lot of everything's on the line every year. Mm-hmm. Everything's on the line every year. And probably, Lacey Vardaman will say, it's about once a decade you make a crop, and it's getting harder and harder. It's never been easy here, and I think arguably, I like what Jeremy Brown says. He's like, I think we're trying to outperform our environment, and so I think a lot of people are, embracing that idea as we come closer and closer to the end of our irrigation supply of water, Mm-hmm. So what that's like for, the people that are living in these small surrounding towns is that they have a deep sense of loyalty, and they want a lot of them to raise their kids there. They maybe did graduate from that school, and they stayed, and they had a great experience, and they want that for their kids, but they also want other things for them, and I have a friend that they moved their family out to about 20 miles out of town, and were, coming back and forth. And she said, it's hard to live a city life and a country life. Mm-hmm. You really you have to pick. When you choose that, it's the choice of giving up a lot of things that just, they're not available. Those opportunities aren't necessarily going to be available to your kids unless you move them into town. And so a lot of people are making a lot of sacrifices to keep that culture alive. And what we would love to do is to see it not just alive, but vibrant again, And it's interesting, Nick, I remember when Walmart came into Brownfield, and people were like, this is going to kill all of our small business. It's going to kill all of our small business. And guess what it did? It killed all of our small businesses. And now guess what? Walmart has left. I think West Texas in particular is particularly hard. And I think part of it is just because our communities are closer together, and so they do kind of compete. I remember when we moved north, we had to go, like, one town you go to church, and one town you go to the bank, and in another town, you go, to the accountant, and another town you go to the hospital, so you're like in 4 different directions, because there's not enough population in one of those communities to have the infrastructure.
Yeah. Earlier, you mentioned the role that technology has played in your lifetime in changing the way that agriculture is done out here, and increasing productivity, but also decreasing the number of individuals that are actually involved in the operations, and the consolidation of the family farm into these massive acreages. What are some of your personal experiences that you've had as a result of these changes over time?
Well, for us, it meant you have to be bigger and bigger. You're making less money per acre every single year, if you're making money per acre, and so it's a matter of scale, and so you have to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And the truth is that a lot of these big, massive farms are still family farms, right? But they're just, in order to survive, or in order to make any money, and most of them aren't even doing that, is that as each acre becomes less profitable, then there's a push to say, the answer is to, higher yields. This can't continue to be the answer, and the answer's got to be, the bottom line has to increase. And so if the bottom line per yield is per acre is not increasing, you got to increase your acres in order to make more money. And so then you see now, cost of the land is like enormous. I'm surprising to me how much people are paying for land, and I mean, it's hard. That makes it harder to get in, and then as profits go down, then landlords aren't happy because their farm's not as profitable. And so, they are, wanting to, change tenants and, to somebody that's, they think is going to make more. So it's there's always good and there's always bad. And, I think we don't really, until we get hit between the eyes with the social ramifications, do we ever think about what the social ramifications are going to be of technology. And I am pro technology. I mean, we actually at the moment have a contract to help NASA acres, and so super excited about that. And so we're pro technology, but you got to look at all of it and think like, okay, now what has this done to our local communities, and what does that mean for them?
Looking at these trends over time and how, while benefits to business and productivity have occurred, the social aspects of what this does to communities is pretty tough to deal with. And for somebody who's grown up in it, it would be a very easy response to want to get away from that, to want to find something else to think about or to do, to be involved in. Where does the energy and passion come from for you in this work and still being involved and rolling up your sleeves?
I think it's my grandparents. I think it's thinking about the investment of years, that people saw something. Either they saw something in this area or they came here because they were desperate. And I think that a lot of it was the second, that's that latter, that my families came here because, part of it is like the last frontier, really. If you think about what was the last frontier in the United States, and we're really part of that. We're not that old here. Our history is not that old. And I mean, as far as us as what we call white Americans, I guess, obviously there's, people here before us, but they were doing things differently, but they came here because they needed a place where they could make a living and raise their families, and they weren't finding that where they were, and so that, to me, it's that the spirit of determination that they stuck it out like through the Dust Bowl. And that, like I can remember my husband's grandma talking about like how she, in the house that we lived in before, like they built a house, the house that we lived in when we were first married, but they built it in front of the original house that they lived in. And she would stand cooking on the stove with a blanket over herself and the stove because the sand was just blowing through the house. And that people made that kind of sacrifice to create what we have here, that they saw that value. And for us to just say like, there's no value here, I can't see it. And I do sometimes feel, out of place because some of the things I care about, it feels like maybe aren't, as much on people's radar. But I think part of that is because there's not been the opportunity for them to be there. I grew up in a county that had a very active soil and water conservation district, and they're still one of the best, I think. I didn't know growing up any different, and it wasn't until I saw some others that I was like, wait a minute, this isn't what I remember. I remember that that you have to rent all these buses for the farm tour. Every year, people are going on this farm tour. And, I remember when they passed by our house and we're, 30 miles in the middle of nowhere, and all the kids and I were outside, and of course we also had political signs, vote for, da, 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 da. So I will say that I did grow up in a family that my dad's if anyone knows my dad, he's very opinionated. And so like that, we used to say we had politics for breakfast at my house growing up, And so I definitely had that, kind of ingrained in me that like, maybe even my aunt used to say, yo, that's called codependency. You didn't fix everybody's problems, But I think that's part of it is, just always seeing that my mom always thought you can always do something more efficient. And my dad is always going to fight a battle and not afraid to ruffle feathers, and those are, can be, for every strength, there's coordinating weaknesses, and I have a friend that says, but you can't mess with the one without messing with the other, and so trying to like take the best of those things that I saw and digging into those, to mean like, okay, so what are the good parts of this, and how can I spend my energy developing the strengths of that trait, and so it's been a weird process getting here, because Nick, my family was involved in it's actually on the list of cults now, and of course my parents, bless their hearts, I'm sure they're listening. Love you guys. They love and care for us deeply, and my kids tell me all the time, yeah, you made a lot of mistakes, but I never wonder if you did it because you loved us or not. I never wonder, And so I always remember how gracious my kids have been to us to be forgiving in our mistakes, So, but that was very, to use a term maybe more people are familiar with, patriarchal. So there was, it was a sin to work if you're a woman. That was just not something that was an option for me. And I also had severe, what I know now to be dyslexia and ADD, which was completely undiagnosed. At the time, nobody even heard the word dyslexia, and ADD, girls didn't have that, that was a boy thing. I did not do well in school. And then, so it didn't feel like I, had the capacity to do something besides, I'm going to be a wife and mother,
right?
Which is, I have some regrets on how, I think I could have been a better mother if I had probably worked, because I think that just the kind of personality that I have, but I homeschooled my kids and, spend a lot of time with them and didn't spend any time thinking about what am I going to do when they're gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, of course, then we wound up adopting Joseph, about the time they were all gone. We pretty much kind of started over with a 12-year-old from China.
To continue on this, it's clear that there were a lot of barriers to you being able to find success and to be your authentic self in life. To do the work that you do today requires you to work with a lot of people who have very different views, disagree on a lot of different things. And in that world, you're known as somebody who can build community. When you think about the challenges, the barriers that you've had to overcome in your life, what are some of the experiences that you think have really helped you get to this point?
Realizing the damage that black and white thinking does. That's what all cults are about. They're all looking for security. That security of this is the exact thing in every situation. And when I know what that formula is, then I'm secure. I know who I am. I think a lot, so often about Fiddler on the Roof. I don't know, that it's just such a wonderful, wonderful musical. And, it's all about him trying, what's more important to me, tradition or relationship. And for me, that has been, I would think that that's kind of just like the theme of what my life has been in the last 20 years is just like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is it because it's just tradition or because it's what I've seen done, or, what's more important? And it's people, and the people in that are around me, my family and my community. And as, the years have gone by, I've been fortunate to, just like having Joseph, going through COVID with a little Chinese kid was really difficult here. And you take a kid who's just learning to read English and the only word he knows is the F word. And so he recognizes it when it's a sign and says, F the Chinese, and, so when you begin to experience those things in your family, it builds empathy. And that is something that I didn't value, because to me, empathy meant that I might be wrong. About the things that I'm sure about, and that vulnerability is not a fun place, to be in. And part of that is, when you deal with trauma, no one wants to be the victim. And so a lot of times will diminish the things that you've been through, because if you say these things that happened to me and were done to me were wrong and there was nothing I could do about it, that is a very powerless position to be in. And so I will say that I spent some time, feeling that way through bankruptcy, that, dealing with the reality of, okay, now here I am, my kids are leaving. What's my value? What am I going to do? But then I recognize that all the things that have happened through the years, our bankruptcy, I've had a lot of rejection on religious, the religious side of things. There's been some really, really traumatic things that have happened there, but it has all coalesced to making me who I am. That suffering has kind of just built the empathy muscle. I remember when Joseph first came, like as counselor saying, it's a muscle. You can build empathy. That's something that has just developed over the years that has led me to like taking my mom's trait of like, can we do that easier? Isn't there a better way to clean your room? I think there's an easier way to make, why are we canning this way? Or let's chuck corn a different way, like let's do something, a different way that might be easier. And seeing that and seeing the problems that I mean, so clearly see, I think that there are just some people that kind of see those things. And how can I be a service? How can I take the things that I've learned? I never set out, I would say, I didn't know that I was building a career. In 2019, I had no idea that that's what I was doing. But that is, I was thinking about, today what we were talking about. And I was like, if you think two things that I think have been instrumental in the last several years, it's grit and gall, like, and I don't know, maybe because I never felt like I was someone that has had confidence, but more of, I when you're doing something for someone else, it's like there is a reason for you to do it besides just just you.
People around you who work with you see the strength of will and determination that you bring to the work, and this deeper understanding of it that you're talking about here, just for me at least, gives a really strong appreciation for your lived experiences and how they've made you the way that you are today and why you are so capable of doing this work. And I'm curious, at what point did you know that conservation was something you wanted to go all in on?
My goodness, like I can't even pinpoint, I think, a day, but just, I grew up in the Limbaugh era. Environmentalist wackos is all I ever knew, and you were either an environmentalist wacko because it's black and white thinking. And so you either were a wacko or you didn't believe in it at all. There was nothing in the middle. And as I think when we started getting involved in hemp, I took a job on to investigate hemp for an absentee landowner. I wasn't thinking about conservation. I was thinking, when I figured out what we're actually talking about, not marijuana, we were talking about a plant that is a food, a feed, and a fiber plant that can be grown in rotation with other things. Why aren't we thinking about this? It seemed like, an opportunity. But that put me around other people that I would have never been around. And then some of them I never hope to be around again. And that's just the truth, They're pretty bad. But it also, I remember I connected with a friend, and he grew up in, his family was one of the settlers in Terry County. He and I connected. He connected with me through hemp, Trevor Vaughn. And, I knew his grandparents, who they were. I mean, his mom, they had moved off, and they were very deeply connected. They were cheerleaders at Tech, and you know what I mean? So he's rooted in this area, but is living in New York. And he called me and he said, when his granddad died, he's like, Trevor, I want you to be thinking about, I want you to think about this land. Think about it, And he's like, it's not something I'd ever ever thought about other than just the casual, be there for the summer, and he started, because of his granddad, he started like reading about this area and learning about our area, and then learned about grapes and wound up getting his viticulture certification. And like, and then he started reading, he told me, he said, I read about the Ogallala Aquifer, and I wanted to go up and down the streets of Brooklyn and scream, the aquifer is going away. It is going away. And I was like, like, what? Because it's like, sometimes I feel like we have this collective fear that has paralyzed us into not accepting the reality of the situation that we're in and where we're heading. And, I keep saying we're going to hit a brick wall at 150 miles an hour if we don't slow down and think about what changes can we make. And I think people think we have to make a big change, Well, it was Trevor that, of course, he was like, I'm like, Trevor, don't talk to me about worms one more time. I don't want to hear about earthworms. This is crazy. And then, I'm like, find out that my friend Lacey here is like, yeah, we had this worm pile, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and so I'm like, maybe there's something to this. So then I'm like, okay, Trevor, tell me about worms, and he is like, so exciting what he's doing. He's working with Buckminster Fuller Institute, and they are helping him to actually purchase some land that was in his family and for research. So, it's a really exciting thing. And I worked with him for a long time on that project, and trying to figure out how can we put something in that maybe is some kind of incubator for, on-farm research. And, also Curtis Griffith and Dolly at, I can't remember Dolly's last name, but she's in Morton. Mm. And she's taken her family land and converted it to a research farm. Mm-hmm. So, Lacey has got a piece of land that they want to do research on. So it's the influence of the people and seeing the success that people were having with other things. And then going, like, I don't know how many states I've been to now and seen ag production. I think it was like 3 years ago, did a project for an organization out of Oregon and basically put together an ag syllabus for the Foreign Ag Service for a tour there. And, and then first time I'd seen hops, and did this whole ag tour of Oregon that I had to, put all the documents together and all this hyperlink stuff for them to learn about this, and seeing that, like, that getting out of our culture and seeing that other people are doing things. I can remember how shocked I was when I was in Oregon and the guy was like, yeah, this is, they pulled up, the Hohans pulled up and they're, in a nice van and pulling a portable potty behind it. And he's used a drone to identify all of the, hemp plants that are male in his field. And they go directly to that and pull that up. And he's paying them $21 an hour. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah. Like, no big deal to him. Right. It was just part of it, and I couldn't even imagine thinking that way, like this cost of production here, it's just, it's being exposed to people that I realized weren't crazy, but were thinking about these things, and seeing conservation in other states. Oh my goodness. We have seen so many things in Oklahoma and in the Dakotas. And, you're just like, the middle of Boston, there's so many things happening that are so good that we don't have to be afraid of. Out here on the Texas plains, water is everything, and there's a resource that's as vital as it is fragile: our playa lakes. These lakes are nature's reservoir, catching rainwater to recharge our aquifer and provide lifelines for wildlife. But now they need our help. In collaboration with the Texas Playa Lakes Conservation Initiative and the Cargill Global Water Challenge, SARA has started the Our Legacy is Tomorrow's Water initiative to inspire and work with landowners to restore and protect our playa lakes. Each playa we save helps secure a sustainable water future for the generations that will be coming after us. Whether it's improving soil health, restoring habitats, or recharging groundwater, we are committed to making a difference. Together, we can build a legacy that we can all be proud of. To learn how you can join in, visit the Playa Lakes Restoration Initiative page on the SARA website. Let's keep Texas water flowing strong for the future. Visit sara-conservation.com.
To do this work requires the ability to maintain curiosity about the world
Yes.
around you. And as you've traveled to all these different locations, seen the types of great work that people are doing across the United States and abroad, have you noticed any similarities in the people that are doing this type of work? Who are those individuals that are saying, I'm going to be a leader in this? I'm somebody who wants to be the first mover.
I think there's way more in common between those urban and rural leaders than they think. And some of it is I have seen, people who have had unrealistic expectations about what it's like to be on the farm. And they're going to come and teach people. I don't know if I had $1 for every time some nicely put somebody said in hemp, I'm going to teach farmers how to farm this. And I'm like, because I've been farming it for 40 years. I'm like, you've been breaking the law for 40 years is what you've been doing. You haven't been farming, like, no, but I see people that have like, and then I heard a woman that had moved to Texas from somewhere in the Northeast, and she's going to put in farm and show people. And she's like, I was wrong. It is hard. It is not easy. That's one of the things I think that they have in common is an honesty. I ask, we were in Boston, and they have this program where they will train people to like take their, hey, let me teach you how to farm, which was really like garden, what we would think of as gardening. Let me teach you how to garden and make money, on this, whatever it is by you or whatever. And so I asked the guys like, well, are they making money? And he said, no, you can't make money doing this. And he said, I've tried to find somebody that could help us figure out the economics. And I said, well, there's probably an ag economist at Extension. He goes, what's that? Right? And so they need us, but, we need them. They're the consumers. They're our consumers. And what I realize is these are our customers. This is our customer base. And how are we reaching them and how are we talking to them? And so you have the same, people, that determination and the grit that's like, man, this is something I want to do and I want to stay here, but I want to solve a problem, and I do think that's part of one of the things that has changed with GMOs for us is that it's not easy. It's just more efficient. And the stress is shifted some, where is the stress of farming? It's maybe not in weed pressure anymore. You know what I mean? But now it's the fact that that I have to pay an astronomical amount for this seed in order to use this chemical. And that's cutting into the cost of my production, But what I'm seeing now is and I'm not, I shouldn't say me. I mean, it's just what's happening is people are happening is they're like, okay, what are other alternatives? What else can I buy that's maybe not as expensive because I have to cut down on my expenses, And so I guess, to answer that question in a roundabout way is they really are the same kind of people. Mm-hmm. They really are the same. The people that I see here that still have what I would think of like the pioneering spirit, the Jeremy Browns, the Kyle Binghams, the ones that are like thinking, Cliff Bingham, that they had a dryland crop this year that was like a bale and a half an acre on a dryland crop, and no, they did not get any more rain than their neighbors did. Everybody says that, and so I'm like that. Wow. Figuring something out. And that's what I think people, especially, after COVID, people are like, hey, I don't want to not have food. I don't want to not have food. And instead of us bringing the message to them to say, we can be a part of the process of learning how to do this. A lot of times, like, it does feel like that's not real agriculture, and what is real agriculture anymore is the question, because it's not what my grandparents were doing, right? And it's getting back to that way, though.
Yeah. You mentioned a family we're both familiar with, the Bingham family, which has a very long line of farmers out here in West Texas. What is it about them that, for you, as you've worked with them, as you've worked with other farmers, what are some of the things about them that you wish you could see in other farmers or you could promote other farmers doing?
So the first environmentalist wacko I knew was Betty. And now I'm thinking she was like not wacko. But, they were the first people that I was like, oh, organics is fad. It's going to go away. And no one's going to care. And I mean, to that point, there is a shift, certainly, but people still care. And maybe they're going to call it something different. Regenerative is what people say now, right? But there's people care more, and their care and concern about what they eat is only going to grow. And that is not something that what I saw was Cliff cared less about what people thought about him and more about what was right for him and his family and his farm. And they've worked hard for the respect that they have. I know, somebody has said, like, even in hemp, like when they got in,
Mm-hmm.
then people went, this could have potential, because they had a proven track record of maybe everything didn't work that they've done, but they've tried more things than anybody else has, and they weren't afraid of how it looked. And I think that's the thing that I wish that I was more like them, in that I cared less about what people think about me, because I worry about that a lot. I worry about it because you walk a fine line, and I try to express like what it's like to be in the middle. And we've had this conversation on episodes before where, I heard from the pulpit for years, the only thing in the middle is dead skunks and yellow stripes. So you're either on the right side or the wrong side. And literally, the guy that the cult that we were in, he would tell people, which, by the way, millions and millions of people attended these seminars, but that he was like, where is, Satan's, the bad stuff? Is it the black? It's the black, and also the gray, but also some of the white. So like, right, the fear of like, even if it's good, it could be bad. Oh my gosh, So, you talk about like a fear of what people think about you, and so this has been kind of a gutsy move for me, even though I do have a lot of gall. I feel like it's taken a lot of gall to do this thing, especially the podcast, because I don't want to isolate anyone. I want people to see that there is a path forward that isn't always mean dead bodies strewn on the side of the road. Like you can make and you can make a difference one drop at a time. And because I can remember thinking like about, like recycling. What good does it do to recycle? And now we know, like in some cases, no good. It did no good. It caused more problems. But you know what the fact is? That we all have microplastics in our blood. All of us, 97% of us do. There's a problem. And instead of being paralyzed or feeling like we have to tell people, you need to make a big change. It's like one time I got did a physical, and they're like, oh, your cholesterol is a little high, so you need to exercise for 45 minutes, 7 days a week. I'm like, what the heck? No. Like, give me something legitimate, like I even if I had time for that, I would never do it, And so I'm like, give me something that's like bite-sized chunk. And that's what I think it's like. Cliff and Betty said, there's something we can do. I remember Betty one time making a big deal about her kids eating the tomato in her hamburger. And I was like, one of her kids asked me one time, do you have Cheetos at your house? I was not into health food, and now I look back and think, oh my goodness, all these things that she was saying then, people have embraced now, and we know them to be true and so far ahead of their time in some of these things. But they did it, not always perfectly, but they kept at it, and in what Cliff did when we started growing hemp and they planted that first time and the stand was so, and he's like, we can do better. We can do better. And we're going to use our sesame plates on our planter now. He knew what to do, and that's the kind of ingenuity and, the spirit so I realized like they were fundamentally very influential in my life in a way that I didn't know that they would be.
When you hit these barriers, these challenges, where do you draw inspiration from to allow you to keep doing the work and to move forward?
What I have been, when we first started, which was about a year or so ago, I mean, we really kind of spent a whole year just investigating. Let's go to all of these meetings. Let's figure out what's being done. Let's try to find out who's doing what and what's working and what's not working. And there was some pushback. Now, hardly any. People care more than I gave them credit for. And when you meet someone, I think too, like for us, Nick, I'm sure you know this. This is something I did not know. Okay, so we have T-shirts that say People, Planet, Profits. And we have a T-shirt that says, stewardship is a verb and it makes you responsible. It's a quote, okay? Which, yes, we know, Doug, thank you, my husband, that stewardship is not actually a verb. But if you are, a grammar Nazi, just take it with a grain of salt. When he said, the real quote from Mike was, who the hell knows what sustainability means? But stewardship is a verb and it makes you responsible, And I was like, where did that word come from? And so I just of course, Google, where did the word sustainability? I mean, why do we use this word? Well, it came from that triple, what do they call it? Triple line economics, where you're looking at all three of those things. You're looking at how's this going to impact people, how's it going to impact the planets, and how's it going to impact profits. So it was created in the 90s. And I wish I could remember. I'm sorry, I'm old.
The triple bottom line?
Thank you.
Yep.
That's it, the triple bottom line. Yeah. And so I think when Doug and I are in the oil and gas industry, that's where we started. Lacey is a quote unquote big farmer, and so we are the people that a lot of times people in the environmental groups maybe or, would tend to not. But I think that I thought I would have more not conflict, but disagreement of how things should work with people that are on the environmental side. And that was surprising too, of how many, sure, there's still people that are on the fringe, but now I wonder how many of these people were on the fringe and come back around or I'm just meeting them. But they are concerned and a lot of times concerned about things they don't need to be concerned about. They just don't know, and it's our, something we can do to educate them. And so I think the biggest surprise to me is people know that most people know these things need to happen. And I've been surprised at the people in the positions that really know it, and really understand, but are, also at a loss of what do we do? What do we do? Because I do think we are a society of, we don't think about, long-term projects as much anymore. This is something we're going to start now. And then to Perry's credit, his water plan is, 40 years, 80 years, but that's why you got to look.
When you reflect on your journey as an advocate in conservation, what are some of the big milestones in that process?
Definitely, of course, hemp, meeting Trevor, getting exposed to some of those things. And then meeting Lacey, who is the founder of the Sandhills Area Research Association, started about 20 years ago. And people can go back to that first episode where I interviewed her about it. She and I mean, this is the goal. Okay, right? I knew the Vardamans were instrumental in the innovation in cotton harvesting. And so I saw her name on LinkedIn. I was like, I wonder if she's the same Vardaman. So, of course, what did I do? But I, messaged her and said, hey, would you guys, and hemp and she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'd be happy to help in any way I can. And then we randomly met through a short-lived women's group ag thing that was here. And on that date, we said, hey, let's go out and look at the hemp processing facility at Slayton. And we stood there and talked for 3 hours. Then I saw what was happening, the money. Oh my goodness, the money that was pouring into agriculture and like going, is it going in the right direction? Is it not going in the right direction? And then I helped, I was working for contract for a company, helping them consulting on hemp things. And they said, we got 2 weeks for this grant to do. Would you help? And never done a grant before. They had a grant writer, quote, unquote. And it's a long story, but that was a $5 million grant. And then I helped with the SBIR grant, which was my second grant, which was miraculously won. And then I did a third grant and won. And, I didn't know that I could write. It's not something I ever thought I would do, And so I do use somebody with dyslexia. I do use a lot of Grammarly and a lot of Chat GTP. And although wasn't around when I wrote the first one, and had to do budgets and put together economics and things that I, more than anything, I didn't know that I was building a career, but I knew that I probably was not the perfect fit for a landman job, which is what I was doing for Doug. I'm really great at the negotiating part, and I can find anyone, anywhere. I have found people that have been lost in nursing homes for 5 years, a guy who was living in a cow trailer. I have found folks that were lost. So, I'm really good at research through those opportunities, and then when all this came about, the money that was being invested, through the IRA and all this stuff. And I just reached out to Lacey and said, what's going to happen with all this? She said, well, I just got on this board, this Saltwater Conservation District board. You know what this is? And I was like, yes, I do. We got involved there, and she was like, I really don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but let's go to some of these meetings. And I was like, okay. So we started going to the National Association Conservation District meetings. We've just kind of stuck with it. And I knew with originally working with Trevor that there was a need. There's a need. I couldn't find an entity on our side of the state, especially in our area, that was grassroots, that was holistically looking at our rural economy and the impact of the things that are happening in agriculture and what's going to happen in 30 years, that was taking that holistic look. That is grassroots from here, living here, going to have to be impacted by the consequences of that. And so we were like, I think we could be, to use a word that's really popular these days, efficient. We can be more agile and more nimble. And so we saw what was happening in Oklahoma. We saw what was happening in places like Arkansas. And we were like, how can we bring those ideas here? And in particular, like a one Sewell District, Water Conservation District in Oklahoma that has just been so good to us. And I've spent time with them, mentoring with them. And they have a rural relending program and millions of dollars that they are investing in low interest loans to rural communities. They're putting MRIs in hospitals and putting in dentist office and dance studios and little things that maybe, a bank isn't, going to necessarily want to do. And so, or, they just don't have, they're too risk averse for that, which is, it's fine. That's right. But these are opportunities, and so it's taken us a year and a half of pushing on that opportunity to now finally feel like the door's finally opening. And so, that's, I feel like another milestone. We've, we had another, I think, milestone. We go to an oil and gas conference every year, and that's focused on Permian Basin. And so we've made some really great allies in the oil and gas industry. They have their own, conservation, what they call sustainability folks in there, and they have their own goals that they need to meet. And same with textiles. In fact, we just got an email from a very large popular brand yesterday. And those people are looking for farmers, and we're going to make changes based on relationships. And so all of these, if you see the theme, it's people. All of the milestones are people. I love people. I don't know that people can tell by the interviews I do, but just so people will know, we were laughing about this earlier today. Like I don't like to come in with a plan. No. Let's don't have a list of questions. That makes me nervous. We're just going to talk, And so I love people, and I want people to know about other people, because that is, the opportunities are always about people, and it's people that are the problem and people that are the solution, And so every milestone is a person, Like I remember in hemp, in my own career, what I see now is that I have been building a career for 5 years, and I had no idea that that's what I was doing. But one of the first people I met in hemp was Bill Timpany. And I know you remember him, Nick. And he came to Lubbock a couple of times and then hosted me in Canada. And Bill was he owned the first company to digitize oil and gas data and sold that to IBM, then turned around and built like several other fintech companies. He was like the millionaire next door. You would have no idea. And he would tell me, you're good at this. He was my cheerleader, telling me, hey, you have value doing this. And then I remember one of the board members, Russell Williams, who is a great, I have so much respect for him. Russell was, policy for American Farm Bureau in DC. He is a smart guy. And he was like, you're good at this. Like you're good at this. And that it's interesting. That is what I needed, was to come from men to say, because it was men that said you can't, and to have men say you can. And and I'm not trying to bring up the politics of all the gender things that are happening right now. I'm just saying that that's my lived experience. My lived experience was, no, you can't. Here's your place. And then to have men come, I don't think that men understand the value that they bring to society by coming alongside women that need the confidence. And there's so much that they can do, that we need them to be advocates, and because so many of them do see it. They see it, and when you see it, say it, And so unfortunately, we lost Bill a couple of years ago, and I learned so much about business from him that I had farm background in the business from that, and, but just the startup knowledge that I learned from him was unbelievable.
And I don't disagree that sometimes it takes somebody from the outside to recognize our talent.
Yeah.
For us to start believing in ourselves and the power that can have.
Yes.
And you have achieved so much in the time that you've been involved and gone deeper and deeper and deeper into the community that surrounds conservation, not just here in the United States, but globally. And I'm curious, what are the things that get you excited about the future in conservation? What are things that you look forward to and reflect on?
I think it has to do with people again, having, creating opportunities. One of the grants that we applied for and we got the grant, but we had to change our plan up for the grant, which is so awkward. But it was a 6 weeks deep dive in conservation jobs. What are the jobs in semi-arid and desert regions? Because I think a lot of times we look around us and think, who cares? It's ugly and there ain't nothing. There ain't no trees to conserve. There's nothing here. And so and you don't know that there are people here doing work and that we're 100 employees short in zone 1 for the NRCS, 100 employees, and so then they're the ones that are, it's their job to put conservation on the ground, but people, there's people that would like to stay in these communities. We need them to know that these jobs are here, and so this is like, hey, let's take 10 kids and let's spend 6 weeks and let's go from the wettest part of the Panhandle to the driest part of the Davis Mountains. Let's go into the Chihuahua Desert, and that's what gets me excited, is that I feel like what we're doing, and especially through now we've got 5 AmeriCorps people with us. If, I knew nothing about AmeriCorps till this. I just knew nothing about conservation efforts, but 5 AmeriCorps people that, and one of them is a conservation planner and is about to put like a bunch of great like educational stuff on our website. We're really starting to beef that up. One has a background in communications and marketing and produced water. So super excited, because do consumers know what produced water is? And you need to know, because guess what? It can become safe drinking water. It can become water for agriculture. Like, we need that, but nobody is picking up the torch to say, hey, consumers, this is what's coming. And what I don't want to see is people that want to end fossil fuels coming in and saying, this is bad, and like, let's get ahead of this marketing opportunity, and so what I'm looking forward to is partnering with those companies. Like, we partnered with Milestone Environmental Services on the, to raise awareness, to update the regulations or lack of regulations on energy waste, and there were oil and gas companies that wanted that done, because, and some didn't, but for the most part, yes, they don't want people to think that they are falling to the lowest common denominator, And so I think that's the things that I'm looking forward to, is the projects that are ahead of us. This opportunity that we have with NASA, and being able to recruit farmers, like, to come on and say, you can have research with NASA. You get to have, and the coolest thing about this whole program is it is starting with the farmers. It is not NASA coming and saying, we decided what research you need and here it is. It is them saying, what do you need? You come together as a board and you figure it out. That is what I'm looking forward to, is because that's how we will fund, that's how we're going to fund the nonprofit Sandhills Area Research. We do it through creating these projects, and they are mutually beneficial. An industry needs them. They're going to pay someone to do it, pay us to do it, and then make a donation to us. And then we don't have to waste our time doing any kind of fundraising and hosting, spending your time doing things that maybe are going to make you money, but they distract from the mission. So that's what I'm excited about, is I want to introduce the people that I'm meeting to this amazing part of the world.
Tillery, that's all the time that we have today. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you.
Thank you, Nick. I really appreciate it. And when they were like, you need to get somebody to interview you, I was like, who would that be? Who would that be? I appreciate it, Nick. And I hope that you all stuck it out through this whole podcast. It's probably not nearly as exciting as like Robert Mace, who's hysterical. If you haven't listened to that one, you should go back and listen to it. So I'm not nearly as funny as Robert is, but thanks for tuning in. And Nick, thanks for being here. And friends, we are excited. Like, we're looking at the numbers of how many folks are listening, and it's so exciting to see the growing amount of people that are listening consistently. And you're valuable to us and the reason that we're doing what we're doing. So would you take the time to like and share it, because that is how we're going to reach more people. We will visit with you again on the next episode of Conservation Stories.